Pragmatism and philosophy were there very much alongside each other. It feels like in the football world there's a tension between the two. In Philadelphia, it felt like both of them coexist together. You've just got to have the skill as a coach to understand both and to adapt and live in the grey some days. But also then that's where the leadership skills come in of someone like Gareth Southgate, of someone like Wilfried Nancy, who can come in and say, yes, no, this is how we work it. Confidence, clarity, they all work together. Hello coaches, and welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach Breakdown. I have just returned from the Aspire Academy Global Summit in Philadelphia alongside Philadelphia Union and MLS. Absolutely brilliant event. Some of the best minds in world football presented their ideas, their beliefs, discussions all around different aspects of the game today. If you want my notes from that event and the presentations that I observed, you can get them for free on the link below, modernsoccercoach.com. Over the next few minutes, I just want to share some of the takeaways that I had personally, not just the tactical trends, but also where I think the conversations around football today are happening at a coaching level, at a technical director, at executive level, why they are important, and of course some of the personal takeaways from the presenters that I watched. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, please subscribe. Again, please subscribe. We've got 60,000 this week who are subscribed to the channel, but we are still at 50% typically of the videos watched, they are subscribers. So if you're watching this and you watch a lot of our content and you realize that you're not a subscriber, please go ahead and make sure you subscribe. Tons of more content coming. We're working very hard as the subscriber rate keeps to increase. We're also looking to increase the volume of content we're putting out and the quality of content we're putting out. More discussions, more interviews, more breakdowns, more sessions. And if you still can't get enough of that, please make sure you take a look at Modern Soccer Coach Insider, where you get access to all the Modern Soccer Coach webinars, all the future webinars that we're doing, all the paid webinars that we're doing. You get access to all of them. Plus, you get access to weekly bonus content and our WhatsApp group where you can share and where you can also request specific plans and specific exercises that we'll put together. Modern Soccer Coach Insider, I'll put that on the link below as well. Okay, let's take a look at the Aspire Academy Summit. Let's go. All right, so first off, the event kicked off with Valter Di Salvo, who is the executive director of Aspire Academy. Now, sometimes the kickoffs, when you're having these events, sometimes the kickoffs are just, hey, listen, this is what we're gonna do. I thought this kickoff was really interesting, just for the language. I've seen Aspire Academy, I'm aware of what they were doing. Of course, their presentations, I've watched the Bielsa one quite a few times. I actually done a blog on it about 2 years ago. So I watched it quite a few times to get some stuff from that. But Aspire Academy, I think everyone in the football world knows about the work they're doing around great presenters, great topics. But Valter talked about the goal was to connect the coaches, information sharing, and also building a true community. He had a great quote that I wrote down. I thought it was really powerful. Putting money in education is not a cost, it's an investment. And I think that's a really powerful way to look at coach education. Sometimes, again, like everything today, there's a cost on taking a course, there's a cost on subscribing to something. Hey, there's a cost on the MSc Insider. And there's also a time cost on going to these events. For me, 2 or 3 days out of the schedule, getting up there, the cost of travel, the cost of hotels, but it is an investment. And it's not just an investment in information, there's also an investment in the connection. I thought Valter was really good at articulating how important that is around football circles, where of course football is a unique industry, it's a unique business, where it is a very relationship based business, where you know someone or you know someone who knows someone. It always feels like there are 1 or 2 degrees of separation in the football world, and I don't think you can do that anymore by a laptop. And obviously, of course, in today's world, you have the information quite accessible. Hey, you can go anywhere on YouTube and get links. You can go anywhere on the internet and get sessions. I understand that. But I think it's important to be aware that the human component should always take precedent. And also as well, when you're in the ecosystem of football, you do have a responsibility to give back. And I do believe really strongly that that applies to every single level. It's not just, hey, the professional coaches who should give back. It's coaches at every single part of our ecosystem should give back, because ultimately people learning from the experience of others, people discussing different viewpoints, that's how football gets better. There's not just one way to do it and we're all sharing that blueprint. No chance. It's about sharing your experiences, about sharing your beliefs, and sometimes those beliefs differ, and sometimes those methodologies will differ as well based on different contexts and different variables. I think all of that is very, very healthy, and I think we all need a little reminder every now and again, as Valter did before we kicked off the Aspire Summit, in how important that is for the global ecosystem of football. That led us into the discussions and the presentations. First up was Rafa Benitez. I'm sure you're aware of Rafa Benitez. It's really, really interesting with Rafa Benitez. Sometimes we forget that, you know, you look back at football, the history of the last 20 years, and you think of Pep and what he did tactically. You think of Jose and what he did tactically. But I think in between that sits Rafa Benitez, where he was working in a lot of pragmatic approach to the game. The Liverpool teams, his Valencia teams, then obviously taking charge of Real Madrid as well. Rafa Benitez, as you would expect, get up and talked about the tactical evolutions in the game, the change of the game, but he came at it from a really unique perspective. He spoke about analysing 183 goals over the last 12, 24 months, whatever it was, how many of them goals came from transition moments, but he went one step further in the presentation, and then it went into levels. The big change he talked about was that zone 2 and how many transitions are happening in zone 2. So when we think of high press and we think about winning the ball high up the pitch and scoring initially, but when that's described, you don't really have a bank of goals that suddenly come into your head. However, when you think about transitions, they usually happen in zone 2 of the build, and teams obviously have space then to exploit once they win the ball. How does that shape the play? Quite a lot for Rafa Benitez. Talked about teams, 44% of teams that are now playing over presses. 44% of teams playing over presses. And if you think about that, and what Rafa did eventually was he linked it back to youth football and 1v1 development. But if we think of 44% of teams today are playing over a press, again, it's very, very easy for you to visualize that, because you see it every single professional game, whether it's the goalkeeper or the centre back or the full back that's clipping balls into the front players. 44% are playing balls over a press. So the game is almost more direct now than it was before, because they're now planning to be direct, to go over presses. What does that do to 3 areas that Rafa looked at? The passing range, the build-up play of a forward, and then also the movement underneath, securing second balls. Rafa also mentioned something I thought was really, really interesting. We talked 20, 30 years ago when I was growing up on a sideline, all you could hear from goal kicks was first and seconds, first and seconds. And yet all of a sudden, here we are again in a world of first and second balls. We just call it a different word. We call it duels today, which I think is really, really interesting. Duels is a fancy word of saying first and second balls. That movement underneath is still really, really important, but the context has changed of how that's framed. There's now a way more tactical piece to that, and I understand 30 years ago there really wasn't. It was really a direct ball, and there was 10, 20 people sometimes competing for those first and second balls. So again, Rafa did a brilliant job in connecting youth football to the modern game. Not necessarily in terms of, hey, how we should be replicating this in our pathways, in our curriculums, in our program, and not necessarily that, but I think he did it really, really powerful, where he said, just to think about, if this is a trend in the modern game, how is that going to impact individual player development? Are you thinking about that as a developer? And again, there's no answers here. There's just viewpoints, there's perspectives, there's discussions. So I really enjoyed that. I thought it was brilliant. Next up was Gareth Southgate with an individual Q&A. As you can imagine, Gareth Southgate talked really, really well about his perspectives in management. There's a couple of things really jumped out to me in that. First off, he got in very, very early to talk about philosophy versus pragmatism, which again is a very, very hot topic of the game today. When you're talking about philosophy, it's been 20 years of everyone saying how important philosophy is. It's now evolved to where everyone's saying, you have a philosophy, you need a philosophy to get a job today. The problem arises about 3 or 4 games in when you're trying to implement that philosophy, and maybe it's going to take a little bit longer, whether that's the style of play that needs to be embedded or that's just the players, the player profile that you need to change through recruitment, through development, through youth systems, whatever it is. You don't have time to do that. So what Gareth Southgate was saying was you have to win in the short term in order to build up that credibility with your system and then eventually evolve it. And he kept going back to that there. He used examples from his England teams about how he couldn't play the exact style of football he wanted to initially, but eventually he felt he got there. At one point, he even got up and talked about the profile of a number 6 being able to receive under pressure and turn and twist and then play forward. He didn't feel he had that initially in his player profile with England. He felt that most of the midfield players wanted to drop lower and face pressure rather than receive the ball under pressure and twist and turn out of it, and how that might be a cultural thing in England. I thought that was very interesting. He kept coming back to the style of management. He kept coming back to communication and the leadership role in that. He said the leader's job is to simplify the game for players, not overcomplicate it. But alongside that, he talked about upskilling yourself as a coach, learning about tactical systems, how even when he was waiting for the presentation to come on, he was watching Rafa and he was taking notes in that there. He also talked about his golf game and how he was using coaching philosophies alongside his golf game with a little bit more time. So very, very much exuded a presence of growth mindset. Very, very humble, very articulate about the craft of coaching. You can feel his passion about coaching and his passion about leadership. And I don't think it's going to be long before Gareth Southgate's on a touchline again. And I really, really enjoyed his perspective. Another presentation that jumped out to me was Wilfried Nancy, who is the head coach at Columbus Crew. He's built a phenomenal reputation in the US over the last 5 years with that Columbus Crew team and their type of football they've played, that 3-4-3 shape, the style, the game model. So he had Bradley Wright Phillips talking alongside him about asking him questions about that style and about that management style. And a lot around, again, this area, hot topic, balance of creativity versus structure. Wilfried was very, very clear on where he stands for it. He talked about having the vision, then he talked about the clarity, then he talked about the structure, and then the freedom comes in. But he had 2 absolutely brilliant quotes. The first was, without structure, we have no creativity. So you need that structure beforehand. That's not really unusual for a attack-minded coach to say. Johan Cruyff had similar feelings around the game. The second one I thought was really, really good as well. Our systems keep us safe, but relationships allow us to be free. So we talked about how to solve problems in relational football rather than how to solve problems as an 11. Again, hot topic at the minute for football. So it was really, really good to hear that. He also ran a training session, which a really, really unique session design that Wilfried Nancy put out. If you want the session plan, give this video a like and I will do a follow-up video with his exercises that he used in that session. And then the final presentation that I want to share, and don't forget, if you want these notes with all the quotes that I took from the presentations at the Philly event, if you want those notes, you can get them for free on the link below, modernsoccercoach.com. The final one that I wanted to share was Alessandro Nesta. And Alessandro Nesta, of course, they showed the video beforehand and they showed the Euro 2000 kit and Alessandro Nesta in that famous Kappa Italia kit. And you're looking at it going, he's just an absolute legend of modern football, an absolute legend. Comes on the stage, so much charisma. And when the video was playing, he stopped and he said, okay, no more talking about the past. Let's talk about the future. And I think everyone was a bit disappointed because they're like, no, I really want to talk about that Milan team, that Italian team. And thankfully, the guy who was doing the Q&A with him brought him back to a few questions. But what was really powerful was when he talked about, listen, how do you make the transition from, world-class player to a manager today? And he had a great line, the day I killed the player inside me is the day I became a coach. And we thought, wow, that was really, really powerful. Alongside that, he shared his experiences with Miami FC and how the first couple of years he kind of compared those players with the players that he played against and how maybe he wasn't the happiest in terms of his energy, and he had an assistant coach who told him so, and it was really powerful for him that he had to make that separation between being a player and being a manager, and the day that he dealt with that reality was the day that he really felt that he made progress in his managerial role. I thought that was really good. Also talked about Carlo Ancelotti and the impact he had on him. Sven-Göran Eriksson as well was another great manager he played for. Interesting story on Alessandro Nesta that he shared towards the end was he played with Paul Gascoigne when Paul Gascoigne was at Lazio, which is incredible when I grew up. And I remember Gazzetta, obviously, Italian Channel 4 football every Saturday, Sundays. Alessandro Nesta was in the middle of that, to the extent that he broke Paul Gascoigne's leg. He said it was one of the worst days of his life in a training accident, Paul Gascoigne. But he said he was such a great guy, such a legend. And that kind of tied in with the theme of his presentation, talking about players, talking about great managers, talking about how all that comes together. And then you build your coaching philosophy, back to that word philosophy. And I do think you need a philosophy today, because when you're talking about all these great managers, they all do have philosophies. And of course, the obvious answer was someone like Nesta, who's coming to coaching so fresh from playing, is, hey, what did you take from all these great managers? The obvious answer is, I took a little from everyone. But you can't roll into a multi-million dollar, multi-billion dollar organization sometimes and say, hey, I've just taken a little bit from everyone, we'll see how this goes. You have to have a plan in place, you have to have a structure, you have to have values, and you have to have processes, and you have to be able to articulate that to a different form of football leader. It might not be, maybe more business centric, maybe more data driven than perhaps a traditional football person who would have give you a job 20, 30 years ago. So that has changed. But I think the biggest message from the event in Philadelphia was that ability to adapt, the ability to align. I don't know whether they meant this in the design of the event, but that element of pragmatism and being aware of pragmatic values, whether it was Wilfried Nancy, whether it was Rafa Benitez, or whether it was the staff at Philadelphia Union who talked about their counter-pressing model, their very vertical Red Bull type football that they play, the numbers behind it, how they're just coming off and winning the league, how successful that has been. Pragmatism and philosophy were there very much alongside each other. It feels like in the football world, there's a tension between the two. In Philadelphia, it felt like both of them coexist together. You've just got to have the skill as a coach to understand both and to adapt and live in the gray some days. But also then that's where the leadership skills come in of someone like Gareth Southgate, of someone like Wilfried Nancy, who can come in and say, yes, no, this is how we work it. Confidence, clarity, they all work together. And that was a big, big takeaway for me. So I just wanted to share some of that. Again, it's a topic that's coming into football quite a bit today. Obviously, with the situation in Manchester United, it's something that everyone's talking about. And I think it's a really, really healthy discussion. But also, and the last thing I'll say is sometimes in football and sometimes in life today, especially with social media algorithms, it wants you to choose one or the other. And I think where you consume and how you consume your football is very, very important for you as a young coach or for you as a football leader. I think there's always an answer in the grey here, but you can't just say and sit in a room with football people where there's a lot of stakes on the line and say, oh, hey, listen, there's a balance. You have to get the balance right. Well, when you're in those conversations or when you're sitting in front of players in a high pressure environment, you actually get paid for finding that balance, and that balance has to be absolutely definite. You have to draw a line in the sand, not in terms of where you stand for, but you have to draw a line in the sand of what your processes are around that balance. And I thought the summit was brilliant in provoking thought, challenging thought, discussions around that. I absolutely love some of the chats I had, some of the new people I met, some of the people I ran into and talked about what they're doing in football. Some people working in really interesting roles. And again, it's a theme today where people are trying to solve problems around, hey, how can I impact, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's leaders, in the football world with so much information and so much pressure alongside that to have success. It's an interesting time in football, but a massive, massive thank you to the people at Aspire Academy, Philadelphia Union, MLS, Paul Templeton as well. Big shout out to him for all the work he's doing up there. It's refreshing to attend an event with such modern topics being discussed at such a high level. It's also quite inspiring for me as someone who loves their football content and obviously the football leadership component as well. It's inspiring to see people work through these problems on a daily basis with organizations and clubs around the world. So don't forget, you can get the notes of this below at the website, and of course, if you enjoy the content of Modern Soccer Coach, please don't forget to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe as well. Do not forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please make sure you give it a review. We haven't done a review in ages on the podcast, so here's the shout out for a review. Would help the algorithms on our end, help grow the channel, and help us attend events like this and give a little bit back to coaches on the back end. Thanks so much as always for all your support, Modern Soccer Coach. Thanks, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.